Hi class, this is the answer for your assignment on the correlation and cross tabulation. So the assignment was on question 1 and 3. Now when you do a correlation, we have to really look at the question. So for this very first question, they compare the preference for drive less than 30 minutes to every other variables. So in this case, we would first have to always report the significance. So here you can see there's these two stars beside the number, so it's significant at 0.01. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to say, that we have is significantly different from 0, and because the sig value is less than 0.01. And so when there is a significance, it's not talking about differences now. It talks about whether there's an association or not. So in this case, there is association between drive, unusual desserts, the drive, large variety, and then the drive and unusual entrees. Now, the very next thing you have to do in a correlation test is after if you indicate or you specify that there is an association, you have to go on and talk about the correlation coefficient size. Okay, so the correlation coefficient size for this relationship, the drive and the unusual desserts, is 753. According to the textbook, Burns and Bush, they mentioned that this is considered a moderate positive. Why moderate? Because it falls between the moderate range. Positive because it doesn't have a negative value there. Okay, so in layman's term, how you would interpret it is when the preference for drive less than 30 minutes increases, the preference for unusual desserts decreases. That is the same for every the rest of the variable here. Okay, so this is also if you round it off, it's 81, so that would be strong. That would be a strong positive, and then this would be a moderate. If you use all 3 decimal places, then all would be moderate. Okay, so if you decide to use 2 decimal places, then you have to be consistent throughout. But regardless, for part 1, there's 3 parts to question 1, there's 3 parts to it. You always have to compare it with the drive, because that's what the question is asking. They're not asking you to compare it between simple decor and elegant decor, but the drive and this, the drive and whatever. Okay, in this case, again, we have to say that whether there's association or not, how to look at it. Correlation significance at 0.01. So all 3 of them have the star, so you would say that there is an association or there is a correlation. Now looking at the correlation coefficient size, this is 791, which means that it's moderate. 793, moderate, and then 818 would be strong. So only this simple decor has a negative relationship. So whenever you talk about it, you would talk about this first, so that when the preference for the drive increases, the preference for the simple decor decreases. Okay? So the last bit is the same. We would always run it by using a comparison to see the relationship with the drive. In this case, jazz combo, it's weak negative. Okay? But for string quartet, it's a moderate positive. So again, you have to talk about it from when the drive is less than 30 minutes, when it increases when the preference of the drive less than 30 minutes increases, the preference for jazz combo decreases. Okay, but again, you always have to mention whether there's an association or not by looking at the significance level. For the third question, you'll look at the cross tabulation. Now the cross tabulation here is talking about the probability, not the likelihood. Okay, probability, if you look at the variables in there, and we did it in the previous assignments, that those are 2 different variables, so you have to make sure that the wording is correct. Now in this case, we have to first report the chi-square. Okay, if their significance means that there is a correlation or an association between income level and probable patronage of the Hobbit's restaurant. We are not talking about whether there's difference between each income level, but the association. So remember, when you talk about the significance level for different tests, it means different things. So you have to have the right wording for it. Okay, so in this case, 33.6% and 47.7%, those have the highest percentages. So that means that the higher the income, the people who have higher income would have the higher probability of being a patron of the Hobbit's Choice restaurant. Okay, for the education level, again, we have to report the sig value. So there is significance, that means that there's correlation. Okay, then we have to talk about, the upscale restaurant is more appealing to who. Same with just now, question 3, the question on the income level. The very third one would be the gender. This case, it's 0.403. That means that there's no significance. What does it mean? It means that there's no association. And looking at this, the frequency here, the percentages, you can see that there's not much of a difference, right? So you would say that it's a 50-50 split. And then for the zip code, you would also again report the sig value. So it's significant, so there is an association. Okay, so when there's an association, you will go ahead and talk about, okay, which zip code area would have people, the highest probability of people visiting or patronizing the Hobbit's restaurant. Okay, in this case, it will be in the B area, but no probable patrons will be in the A area. So this is how you would distinguish it. So just make sure that when you report a result, you don't say things like the significance level is point. Let's go back here. The significance level is 0.7, 0.9. No, this number is the correlation coefficient size. Significance indication is over here at the asterisk here, which is the correlation. Okay, so make sure that, so when you interpret the data, every test that you do, the significance would mean a different thing. So previously we looked at the mean differences, so that means that within the group there is differences. But in this case, the significance means there's association. So for each test you run, the wording must be correct. Okay, so this will be the answer for chapter 14, questions 1 and 3.